9:30 on the Valley's Morning News. Craig Hislop, J.D. Walker, and Will Philwright. Joining us now, a little programming note, Dalton Forsythe, the director of NIL here in Logan, joining us here on the Valley's Morning News. Dalton, I know you are insanely busy right now. Just thank you so much for taking some time here to talk to us about Utah State Aggie basketball this morning.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on.
Hey, Dalton, so give us a little insight. Just a couple of minutes ago, we see the USU men's hoop post the now popular 3 emoji signature. Of course, knowing that we've got Karson Templin coming back, Mason Falslev coming back. I know you can't share all the intimate details of the negotiation and everything, but give us just a little insight on what you do as the director of NIL and what your typical, I guess, day looks like as you're going through this new era of transfer portal basketball.
Yeah, so I think my role has kind of changed over time, but in terms of what's going on right now, I had an opportunity to meet Coach Jacobson as soon as he was on campus, and I think he knew about all of our players conceptually. He's seen them play, watched some of our tournament games, all of those sorts of things. But as soon as Coach Jacobson got here, he met with Mason and Karson for an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours each. And when he came out of those meetings, I said, Coach, what direction do we need to go? What's your first and second priority? And he said, it's retaining these two. And so as we went down our list, we started to look at, in addition to Mason and Karson, who are the pieces that we think we can keep within our budget, and who else do we think we could add from the outside to build a team that's going to be just competitive as it was this year, if not more competitive. And so as we talked with Mason and Karson, I think my role is a couple of things. It's number one, drive the negotiation in conjunction with the coach. I tell all of our coaches, you guys are the subject matter expert when it comes to your sport, and I try and position myself as the expert when it comes to negotiation and not blowing through a budget and abiding by all of the different financial or legal regulations that our school might have in place, so that we're not verbally creating any sort of agreement that actually can't be honored. And then the second thing that I try and do is all of these guys have agents now, including on our football team. The majority of the players have agents. I'm trying to work with the agent to create a favorable outcome and build some rapport, and even go so far as to talk to any connections that I have at other schools to kind of see what's the reality of potential offers that they might be receiving so that we can be in the right price range. And so with Mason and Karson, we did that for about a week, and we're able to come to good outcomes with both of those and bring them back. And then, the 3 emojis thing, I think it generates a little bit of excitement. I know a few people maybe don't like it, but we'll have another good announcement this morning.
Karson, this is Craig Hislop, and
hi.
My question is, we have how many teams on campus under the athletic department, and I'm sure not every member of every team it gets NIL. Is that true?
Yeah.
So do some teams get no NIL?
So July 1st is the first day of our new fiscal year for the university, and Cam and the department have made the decision that every program will have access to some sort of NIL fund. Now, they're obviously vastly different. Football and basketball are going to be our biggest ones, and then it's going to go down from there. So everyone will have access to some pool of NIL resources, and then it's my job to work with the coaches and figure out how they're going to be distributed. So some teams are going to have 5 or 6 people that are on NIL because that's going to be the distribution that gives the biggest impact in improving the team. And then some teams are going to have 10 or 12 people that have mostly equal NIL payments because they're already in a place where it's more a matter of retention than going out and acquiring new pieces in the portal.
Who determines the amounts for each? Is it you and the coach together? Is the coach involved in that at all?
Yeah, I think the way it's working out with most programs is they have to do the recruiting, right? They'll give me a list or a couple of people and say, look, these are the athletes that we would love to plug into this position, and we'll typically develop a range. right? So we'll say, here's the bottom and here's the top. And if we can get the athlete out on campus, I'm obviously trying to stay towards the bottom because the more money we can save, the more athletes we can have in that program. But it's my job to run the negotiation, either with the athlete, their family, their AAU coach, their agent, whoever it is. And where I've already established a range with the coach, I don't have to bother them anytime the number moves or those sorts of things. And they rely on me to use good business sense and try to get the deal done.
Talking to Dalton Forsythe, the director of NIL for Utah State. We'll feel right with the question.
Yeah, Dalton, question. We saw last week that the Utah Board of Higher Education actually told Utah State that they wouldn't be able to increase their athletic fees at the level that they wanted. Part of the increase was for NIL money, as President Mortensen had said. And you talk about this NIL budget, but how much is, that potential increase, and then all of a sudden it was taken and only got a fraction of that? Is that impacting your negotiating ability?
So, that fee raise, I think we ended up getting maybe about 1/3 of what was proposed, if I'm remembering correctly. That's obviously a situation where, as far as I understand, it was approved by everybody on campus that had to vote on it. And then we went there, and like you said, it didn't go through. In the case of men's basketball, which is obviously the one we're probably going to spend the most money on, there are several other things that Cam and the athletic department have done really well to prepare us for this portal. So every year that I've been involved with Blue A Collective or that I've been helping here in the school, we've doubled or tripled the budget. Now, I don't think that can happen going from this year to next year because we're in a really good position. And then I think there's two places you could look right now that have even improved our situation since the day we lost that game in the tournament, which is there's a little bit of what I call contract arbitrage, the difference between Coach Jacobson's year one and Jared Calhoun's contract that we would have paid. So there were some savings there. And then there's some buyout money that's coming in. Now, we don't get all of that in one go. I think the first half or so of it is due within 90 days, and then some of it will trickle in otherwise. But both of those things have helped refill our proverbial war chest as well. And so while the fee hike would have been nice, what you're seeing with Ike and Carter and the athletic department is they're not leaving any stones unturned. They're looking at everything. And the fee hike was a piece of the proverbial puzzle, but it's not going to put us in a situation where we feel like we can't reload a competitive roster this year.
Talking to Dalton Forsythe, the director of NIL for Utah State. A lot of announcements. Of course, Karson Templin coming back. Also, Mason Falslev coming back. Another announcement today. Already saw that we do have an Aggie leaving town. Tucker Anderson going back to Central Arkansas. And that's just, Dalton, that's just kind of the role of hoops today. The staying the 4 years for college, very rare, which makes what KT and Mason are doing very special. But this kind of turnover is something we're going to see from now on. And really the rare ones are going to be the ones that stay. Would you agree with that?
I would agree. I think the nice part about Cache Valley in general, the Spectrum, the Herd, everything we have going on here is that Logan, to me, feels like it's a little bit sticky. If you look at our ability to retain guys like Karson and Mason, that's something special. And especially with the level that those guys are playing at, these are guys that every other team in the country would have loved to have a shot at or have on their team. And I think as Coach Jacobson comes in, that's a guy that's really committed to developing relationships, not only with the players, but with their agents, their families, their coaches, all of those sorts of things, and developing them long term. And I think in a world where, just relative to our size, if we can bring in guys, develop them, if they become one of the top players in the country, we may not be able to keep them the entire time. But I'd love it if we could get 1 or 2 or 3 years out of those guys, develop them some, get insanely productive years. And then the reality is we can't always be highest bidder and typically are not. And they may leave at that point. But we do what we can to keep the guys around. And obviously with Mason and KT, that was a huge win for them. And they've cemented their legacy for me as Aggie legends.
And with the announcement yesterday, Dalton, of Mason Stain, which of course is one of the biggest ones that we've had so far, how much of that negotiation that you talk about with the players, agent, and yourself, do the players actually get involved in? I mean, is it primarily you're working directly with their agent, or is Mason involved in those negotiations?
Yeah, I think it depends on the agent and the read I kind of get on them. And so, as an example, I think Mason has a great agent that's an NBA and then high-end NIL crossover guy. And those agents tend to be very professional. They've been in the game for a long time. They want good outcomes for their players, right? They know that money is not the only driver, that fit, that development, especially for guys that have a legitimate shot at the NBA, is really important to them because they don't want a one-year contract that's going to ruin their guys' shots at going to the next level, right? So with a guy like Mason, his agent was great to work with. I pinged Mason 4 or 5 times, went and saw him at Linked one day, just a couple of different places. So we stay well connected. There's other agents that, there's no regulation in the agent space. There's other agents that I've had a really hard time with, especially on the football front, to be honest. And some of those guys, I've had to go back to the athlete and loop them in and say, look, here's where I'm at. My understanding from you is that this is an outcome you would have agreed to, you would have signed on. Your agent works for you. I need you to ping him and say, hey, I'm okay with the deal that's being offered. Let's get this thing done, or else we might be at a crossroads between just your agent and I. So the experience varies vastly depending on who I'm talking to and what sort of agent I'm dealing with.
What kind of balance would you put when dealing with the agents? You mentioned some that are there. Are you seeing a 50-50 split? Is it 80-20, good agents, bad agents? Because like you said, there's no regulation in this area yet. President Trump tried an executive order. Everybody's trying to get NIL under control or put the cat back in the bag. What would you say your positive versus negative interactions with agents are? And if you don't mind sharing, maybe something outlandish that sticks out with you that you dealt with an agent? There's the laugh.
Oh, man. I got to decide which one it is. I'd say it really is close to 50-50. And I think the nice part about Utah State is we have a lot of athletes that play very well and are in high demand. And what you're seeing in the NIL space now is, it's been around since 2021. We're essentially 5 years in at this point. There's a lot of good agents getting into the college NIL space because they've realized if they were only in the professional sports market, that the top-end collegiate athletes weren't signing with them leaving college because they already had agents from their NIL days. And so a lot of those really good agents from the NFL or the NBA are trickling down into college sports, and those are the guys that I love doing business with because, like I said, they're so professional. One of my least favorite interactions so far is we had a certain athlete that we came to terms verbally with him. I shot an agreement over to his agent. I called the guy and texted him every day for probably 10 or 12 days. And it took so long that this athlete had to show up on campus. They signed their LOI, they signed their financial aid agreement, and had to move into their apartment. And this agent reviewed it later, came back with all these changes I wanted, and I said, look, your athlete's signed already. They're on campus. Huh. And, he accused us of enticement and a few other things, and I ended up going back and renegotiating the agreement just in a good spirit because we want our athletes to be happy here. I don't want anyone to feel like they got trapped on this campus. But, there's things like that where you just wish the agents would be a little bit more attentive to their own clients. But there's a piece that the athletic department and myself can do as well to make sure that all of our athletes are happy as they come here. Because, in my opinion, you got to find that right balance, right? We want a good deal. We want to make sure we don't blow through a budget. There's other factors that go into it. But we also don't want kids on campus that feel like, they have no recourse. We did them wrong or any of those sorts of things.
So really looking out for not only the Utah State athletic program, but also the student athletes, whether they're going to come and stay or whether they're going to go. Dalton Forsythe, the director of NIL at Utah State, let us know how Aggie fans that are listening, alums that are listening, can get involved and support Utah State athletics, whether it's basketball, football, gymnastics, volleyball. How can they get involved to support our Aggies?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that everyone can continue to do is show up on game day. Basketball, the spectrum has been amazing the last handful of years, and you've heard all of the coaches and even coaches from other teams talk about how tough it is to play in the spectrum as a result. And I'd love to get some of our other sports that way. You know, in the last 10 or 15 years, we've seen the MAV be that way, where it's completely full. The herd is right on top of the opposing team. And I would love to get that place filled up again. So get your tickets, renew your season tickets, those sorts of things. I think the second piece is when you see our athletes out in public, talk to them. I want to make sure that all of them feel connected to Cache Valley, that they feel important, because what they're doing, it takes a lot of time and energy and effort. And then, number 3, I always am that guy. Whatever you can do in terms of donating makes a big difference to us. So we have people, from the very top that are donating big sums of money. We're so grateful for them. And then you look all the way down to the bottom end, and we have donors that are putting in $5 every single month. A lot of them still in school, and I'm grateful for them as well for doing so much for us. So any of those things you can do, just get involved with Aggie athletics, give back where you can, support our student athletes. All of those things are great for moving the program forward.
All right, Dalton, thank you so much for your time this morning here on KVNU. We'll circle back with you in a couple of weeks, and good luck on the trail as the director of NIL for our Utah State Aggies.
Thanks for having me.